The ground trembled the first time I felt it, so faint I thought it was just an old pipe rattling. But the vibrations kept returning, always at 2:13 a.m., always beneath my bedroom floor. By the third night, I knew something was moving under my house, something alive, deliberate, and hidden. And when the truth finally surfaced, it exposed the darkest secret my HOA had ever buried, literally. If you believe homeowners deserve truth, fairness, and the courage to stand against corrupt HOAs, then join us. Subscribe to HOA Justice Hub, because every buried secret eventually rises to the light, and every abused homeowner deserves a voice that echoes louder than any HOA cover-up. The first sign arrived on a cold Thursday morning when the frost still clung to the backyard fence, painting it silver in the pale sunrise. My home sat quiet, still wearing the bruised shadows of winter, and nothing seemed out of place, until I stepped onto the living room floor and felt a faint tremor beneath my feet. It was subtle, almost like the passing of a distant subway, except my town had none. The tremor lasted only a second, but it left a strange pressure in the air, like the house itself had exhaled. I ignored it at first. Houses settle, pipes expand, wood shifts. These things happen. But later that night, when everything was silent enough that I could hear the hum of electricity inside the walls, the tremor returned. This time it was stronger, more intentional, as if something was tunneling, clawing, or crawling directly beneath the foundation. I pressed my ear to the floor, half expecting to hear scratching or movement, but all I could catch was a deep rumble fading into stillness. By the third night, the vibrations came at the same exact time, 2:13 a.m., steady, rhythmic, and unmistakably mechanical. The cold fear of the unknown crept across my skin. Something wasn't right. My home shouldn't be shaking like this. The soil around my property shouldn't be disturbed. And yet, every night, the earth beneath me shifted as though someone, or many, were carving a path below. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of my yard, looking for signs. The grass seemed normal, the soil undisturbed, the fence sturdy and unbroken. But when I reached the far corner of the yard, closest to the HOA-owned greenbelt, I noticed something subtle. The ground dipped, barely an inch, almost invisible to anyone not studying it. But I had lived here long enough to know the land was always level. This was new. This was wrong. It wasn't until I stooped down to run my hand across the dip that I felt it. A soft hum, like a generator running underground. The soil was slightly warm despite the cold air. And in that moment, I realized the tremors weren't random. They were under my yard, under my home, coming from somewhere deeper. A sickening realization surfaced. Someone was digging. I stood there, breath turning white in the cold air, trying to piece together who would have any reason to build a tunnel, especially one running beneath my property. My mind turned restless, replaying every HOA meeting I'd attended. They always seemed obsessed with expansion, control, and hidden projects funded without proper homeowner approval. Last year, they pushed 4 security upgrades that no one ever saw. Before that, they forced residents to pay into vague infrastructure enhancements that didn't appear anywhere on HOA grounds. A pattern began forming, a pattern of secrecy, avoidance, and unexplained expenses. That night, I stayed awake with every light off. At 2:13 a.m., the vibration returned, slow at first, then steady, like rotating machinery burrowing deeper. I placed my hand on the floorboards. The pulse beneath me wasn't chaos. It was organized, controlled, engineered. Someone was digging a tunnel with purpose. The next morning, I drove to the HOA office. The building, modern and rigid, stood like a monument to control, glass panels reflecting daylight in cold, sterile sheet. The board members' cars sat out front, polished and uniform, lined as precisely as their strict rules. As I walked through the glass doors, a chill seeped into me, not from the cold but from the overpowering sense that the building hid more than it revealed. I browsed the bulletin wall, pretending to scan announcements while observing the shadows of people inside. The HOA president moved quickly across the hallway, carrying a folder thick with documents. He guarded it with an urgency that struck me as suspicious. My eyes caught a blueprint rolled up under his arm, white pages with dark ink lines forming what looked like structural diagrams. But before I could study more, he disappeared behind a locked door marked, "Staff Only." My pulse quickened. Blueprints, secret documents, hidden tunnels. The pieces sharpened into a picture that I wished wasn't real. And yet I knew I needed proof. Solid evidence that something was happening beneath my home. So I bought a thermal ground imaging camera. The device was meant for geological surveying, but desperation makes people resourceful. That night, around 1:55 a.m., I turned off every light again and sat on the cold floor, camera lens resting over the wooden plank. The moment the clock struck 2:13, the camera lit up. Blue tones of cold soil shimmered everywhere, except for a blazing orange-red line running directly beneath my house. A tunnel. Freshly cut. Active. My heart pounded. The tunnel wasn't just near my property, it was directly under it, bending toward the HOA's greenbelt, then continuing deeper. The image shifted again, showing pockets of heat, machines, equipment, maybe even people moving through it. A wave of adrenaline surged through me. They were under my house, trespassing, excavating, violating property lines, laws, and basic human decency. I saved the footage, knowing I had explosive evidence, but fear quickly spiraled into a more powerful realization. This wasn't just an accident or an expansion mistake or a contractor digging in the wrong direction. This was a plan. A hidden infrastructure project buried from residents. A tunnel meant for something they didn't want us to know. And now they realized someone, me, was close to uncovering it. Because at 2:28 a.m., the vibrations suddenly stopped. Dead silence. Then, beneath the floor, something new echoed. A soft metallic thud. Followed by another. Then a faint scraping sound rising from below, as if someone in that tunnel had heard me, sensed me, or detected my camera. And whatever it was coming closer. The scraping sound beneath the floorboards crept upward like the slow turn of a rusted key, unlocking a door that was never meant to open. The entire house seemed to hold its breath with me as the metallic rhythm grew clearer, measured, intentional, and disturbingly close. It wasn't the random shifting of soil or pipe. It was movement. Human or mechanical, I couldn't tell, but it was approaching with unsettling awareness. I stayed perfectly still, my chest rising in shallow waves as the camera in my hand blinked with sharp colors. The heat signature shifted, drifting toward the surface in a steady climb. The foundation, cold moments ago, now pulsed with faint warmth directly beneath where I sat. The floor vibrated with a strange sensitivity, like something was feeling upward, searching for a weak point. Then everything stopped. Silence settled so abruptly it felt unnatural, as if the world paused mid-breath. The house stood frozen, the darkness thick enough to taste, and for a moment I wondered if my imagination had spun fear into reality. But before doubt could form, a final metallic tap echoed beneath me, a single knock, subtle but unmistakable. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. A cold shiver raced down my spine. I didn't sleep. Not after that. I moved from room to room, checking every floorboard, listening for even the faintest tremor. But whatever was down there had withdrawn into stillness, retreating like a creature disturbed mid-patrol. By dawn, fatigue anchored my body, but my mind surged with raw adrenaline. The tunnel wasn't an accidental dig or a misguided construction project. It was active. A secret passageway beneath private property that someone was moving through with purpose. And I needed to know why. Morning sunlight poured through the windows, soft and gold, masking the dread that clung to my home. Outside, the neighborhood buzzed with normalcy, cars backing out of driveways, sprinklers clicking to life, joggers moving along the HOA-mandated walking path. Everything appeared peaceful, but beneath that surface lay a truth no one else seemed to notice. I walked to the far side of the yard again, where the soil dipped near the greenbelt. In the daylight, the indentation appeared more pronounced, like the earth had subtly sunk overnight. Touching the ground, I felt the warmth again, faint, but abnormal for early morning frost. Something mechanical had been running only hours before. I circled the greenbelt, studying the maintenance shack at the edge of the HOA property. It stood silent, rusty padlock hanging from its latch. But behind it, tire tracks dug deep into the grass, leading toward a section of fenced-off brush that no one used. Broken branches and compressed dirt formed a hidden path, almost invisible unless someone searched deliberately for it. I followed the trail until it ended at a manhole cover half buried in leaves and debris. The cover was new. New metal, new bolts, new seal. Installed recently. This wasn't part of any old utilities. It wasn't listed on the HOA map. And it lined up almost perfectly with the direction the heat signature had traveled last night. The tunnel wasn't only under my home. It extended into the HOA's restricted land, connected by this hidden access point. Sudden movement in the corner of my vision pulled me back. A white HOA maintenance truck rolled past slowly, its engine humming low. The driver remained expressionless, gaze fixed ahead, but the vehicle's speed and timing felt intentional, as if monitoring trespassers or guarding something kept quiet from residents. I stepped back into the trees and waited for the truck to disappear. The moment it turned the corner, I rushed home, heart thundering. The tunnel, the manhole, the scraping under the floor, it all pointed to one conclusion. The HOA was hiding a secret operation, one that involved digging beneath private property without consent. I printed the thermal images, time-stamped and labeled, placing them in a secure folder. Then I scanned them digitally and backed them up across multiple drives. If this escalated, I needed evidence safe from tampering. As the day faded into dusk, unease began to coil around me again. The shadows stretched longer than usual, clinging to the corners of my yard like watchful eyes. By nightfall, my nerves vibrated with anticipation. I positioned the thermal camera beside me and waited, the way someone waits for a storm they can't see but can feel rolling in. At 2:13 a.m., the vibration returned. This time sharper, stronger, faster, like machinery spinning to life beneath the earth. The wooden floor hummed under my palms with a steady rhythm. The heat signature on the camera lit up instantly, bright streaks of orange and red weaving beneath the surface. The tunnel wasn't dormant, it was expanding. The activity zone stretched farther than the night before, branching out like veins, heading toward the back half of my home. Suddenly, the vibrations intensified with a violent jolt. Dust trickled from the baseboards. A deep, grinding noise echoed from below, as though metal teeth scraped against stone. Soil shifted with force, carrying the unmistakable energy of a heavy machine pushing too close to the foundation. Fear spiked through me as the floor shook harder than ever. Then the sound changed. It evolved from the mechanical grind to something more precise, a pressurized thud, followed by the hollow resonance of earth collapsing into a cavity. The heat signature surged upward, brighter and hotter, forming a distinct shape on the camera, rectangular, angled, with sharp edges. It looked like a metal frame, a reinforced tunnel cart, and it was directly below my hallway. The vibrations stopped. The heat signature held steady, unmoving, as though whatever was down there had paused mid-work. A second later, a faint plume of heat drifted up the screen, a figure. Body-sized. Humanoid. It moved toward the metal frame, then toward the surface, pacing beneath me with a slow deliberation that tightened the air in my lungs. My house creaked softly as if reacting to the presence below. And then it happened. Another knock. This time louder. A hard, resonant thud that echoed through the wood like a heartbeat in the dark. The sound vibrated up my spine and spiraled into my chest. The figure paused beneath me, heat signature pulsing lightly. Then another knock followed. Then another. Rhythmically. Purposefully. They knew I was awake. They knew I was listening. They knew I had found them. A chill swept through the room as the figure beneath the floor shifted away from the camera's view, swallowed by the darkness of the tunnel. Silence reclaimed the house. But I knew. This was no longer observation. This was confrontation. The silence that followed the knocking felt heavier than any noise could have been. My house, my sanctuary, stood suspended in a kind of breathless dread, as though the air itself feared the unknown below. I remained frozen on the floor, staring at the thermal camera's screen as the last orange silhouette faded into darkness. The tunnels were alive, moving, changing, breathing like a hidden beast. And I knew with absolute certainty. Someone was down there, aware of me, monitoring me just as I was monitoring them. When morning finally came, its pale light felt weak, barely pushing away the shadows clinging to the walls. My home no longer felt like a place that belonged entirely to me. Beneath the floorboards lay an invisible presence, a violation of space so subtle yet so absolute that it left me uneasy with every step I took. But fear wouldn't solve anything. If I wanted answers, I had to push deeper into the truth. Literally. I spent the first hours of the day studying the thermal images from the night before. The rectangular heat signature had been unmistakable, a metal structure likely part of the tunneling system. Industrial equipment meant large-scale planning. The humanoid form confirmed that this wasn't just remote machinery, it was manned, human-operated, and that meant responsibility, intent, secrecy. All pointing toward the HOA. But why? What would an HOA gain from a clandestine tunnel network? Illegal utilities? Expansion? Hidden infrastructure? None of it made sense. The HOA's obsession with control certainly ran deep, but digging a covert system beneath homes crossed into something far more complex, more dangerous. I needed physical proof. That evening, I prepared supplies. Gloves, a flashlight, a crowbar, and rope. My mind replayed every risk, every possibility that something could go wrong. But the image of that heat signature figure standing beneath my hallway burned into me. I couldn't unsee it, and I couldn't allow them to continue without understanding their purpose. The sun dipped behind the rooftops, leaving the neighborhood steeped in muted blue shadows. The maintenance manhole at the edge of the greenbelt called to me, an entrance into their underground world. I waited until the last dog walker left the area, the last porch light blinked off, and the faint glow of security lights cast long silhouettes across the grass. I approached the manhole quietly, heart thundering, breath held tight. The metal cover felt cold and heavy beneath my fingers, but the bolts came loose with surprising ease. Too easy. As if someone had removed them recently. I lifted the cover and peered into the dark cylinder below. The air rising from it carried the scent of fresh soil, rust, and machine oil, newly disturbed earth mixed with metallic humidity. A ladder led downward. The darkness felt alive, pulsing softly with the faint hum of distant machinery. I went down. My boots met the ground of the tunnel with a soft thud. It was wider than I expected. Reinforced walls, metal ribbing along the sides, industrial floodlights spaced evenly but turned off. The air was cool and still, but the tunnel floor carried faint warmth, the kind that lingers long after machinery stops running. My flashlight cut through the shadows, revealing dust unsettled in thin wisps, swirling in patterns that hinted someone had passed through recently. The walls bore markings, coded labels, measurements, engineering notations, proof of planning, blueprints, systems. This tunnel wasn't a random dig. It was a project, organized, funded, hidden, and stretching far in both directions. I followed the path toward my home. Each step echoed softly, merging with a faint hum deeper ahead. The tunnel curved gently, aligning with my property line. Soon, I found sections where the earth appeared freshly carved, dust still loose on the edges. And then, halfway through the corridor, I found it. The metal frame. The same rectangular shape captured on my thermal camera. It stood half buried in the soil, one side smeared with fresh dirt. A large drilling mechanism was attached to it, its surface still warm to the touch as though it had been running not long ago. Red streaks of heat residue glowed faintly in my flashlight beam. Someone had shut it down abruptly, likely the moment they sensed my presence above. The realization that they had paused operations because of me tightened something inside my chest. They were monitoring the vibrations, just as I was. A two-way awareness. A silent game. I crouched beside the machine, studying its structure. It wasn't standard construction equipment. It was modified, reinforced with steel plates, fitted with a silent drill head, insulation added for noise suppression. Whoever built this cared about secrecy more than speed. And the deeper I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't a project meant for public knowledge. It was covert, unauthorized, illegal. I scanned the tunnel floor. Footprints, multiple sizes. Some deeper, some lighter. A team of workers had been here. Moving equipment, operating machinery, coordinating tasks. All without a single homeowner being aware. Except now, me. The tunnel stretched farther. My home was just meters ahead. The ground above grew familiar in positioning, and soon I stood beneath what I knew was the hallway inside my house. I looked up at the reinforced ceiling of the tunnel, imagining the wooden floorboards above, the thin barrier separating my world from theirs. Then I saw it. A secondary chamber branching off to the right, smaller, more concealed, with a narrow entrance partially hidden by stacked crates. I moved toward it cautiously, aware that every step could bring me closer to whatever secrets the HOA buried deeper underground. Inside the chamber, dim emergency lights glowed faintly. The room was lined with equipment, surveying tools, mapping screens, and rolled-up blueprints tucked into crates. The air vibrated with low-frequency hums from machinery cooling down. I approached the back wall where a corkboard hung, overcrowded with pinned documents, maps, and note. My breath caught. Pinned dead center was a large blueprint, one I recognized instantly from the HOA president's arm the day I visited the office. The diagram showed the entire neighborhood. Red lines marked the tunnel network beneath various homes, branching like a hidden spiderweb. But one thing chilled me more than anything. My house was circled in red ink. Beneath it, a handwritten note read, "Primary access point, Phase 2 entry." Phase 2? Access point? My home was part of their plan. Not accidentally crossed, not incidentally dug beneath, intentionally targeted. I stepped back, pulse racing. And then I heard it. Footstep. Deep in the tunnel. Approaching. Slow. Purposeful. Echoing closer with each second. The lights flickered. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Someone was coming. And they were not surprised to find me here. The footsteps echoed like an omen, steady and unhurried, each step resonating through the metal ribs of the tunnel walls. They weren't panicked and they weren't rushing. Whoever approached knew these tunnels well, knew the rhythm of their echoes, the weight of their footsteps, and the confidence of someone who belonged down here far more than I did. The air tightened with every approaching stride, thickening until it felt heavy enough to crush the breath from my lungs. I scanned the dimly lit chamber rapidly, searching for any hiding place or exit. But the room was small and boxed in, filled with crates, maps, and machinery stacked tightly against the walls. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and not enough time to retrace my steps without being spotted. The footsteps grew louder, closer, echoing off the tunnel curvature like a heartbeat rushing in my ears. My eyes fell on the crates. Metal storage containers stacked 3 high, just enough space behind them for someone to squeeze through if they pressed their back tight against the cold steel. I moved toward them as silently as possible, slipping behind the stack just moments before a silhouette appeared at the chamber entrance. The figure entered, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy maintenance uniform with reflective patches. A flashlight beam swept across the tunnel floor, lingering on the metal drilling frame, then gliding toward the footprints I'd left behind in the loose dirt. He paused. The beam stayed still longer than it should have, hovering over the imprints as if studying them. Then he turned toward the chamber. The beam of his flashlight cut through the room, grazing the crates I hid behind. I stayed still, breath held, muscles frozen. The air felt electric, charged with the risk of discovery. The man walked toward the corkboard, studying the blueprints with rigid focus. His gloved hand traced the tunnel lines, stopping over the red circle around my home. He pulled a notepad from his pocket, scribbled something quickly, then stepped back. More footsteps echoed down the tunnel. Not one person, multiple. A muffled exchange of movement drifted in from outside the chamber. Equipment being shifted. Metal dragging against metal. Doors opening. The tunnel system buzzing back to life. My pulse spiked. They were resuming operations, possibly accelerating them, and I was trapped in the middle of their hidden operation. The first man stepped out to join the others. As soon as his back turned, I slipped from behind the crates and moved deeper into the room. I scanned the corkboard quickly, eyes sweeping across the pinned documents. Some were maps of the area showing depth measurements, soil density readings, and electrical conduit. Others were marked with different colors. Some notes labeled Phase 1 complete, others marked Phase 2 pending. My house remained prominently circled. Phase 2, what did it mean? Expansion? Extraction? An access point? The deeper I looked, the more unsettling the pattern became. The tunnel network didn't just run beneath my house. It branched under several properties. But unlike mine, those houses weren't circled. Mine was the only one marked as a focal point. A hub. A key connection. Why? What made my home so critical? Before I could dig deeper into the documents, a loud mechanical whir filled the tunnel, machines powering on. The drilling frame outside the chamber hummed faintly, red heat blooming across its surface. They were starting up again. This time more aggressively and closer than ever. The ground trembled beneath my feet. I grabbed the nearest document and shoved it into my jacket, an engineering diagram showing depth measurements beneath my home. It had markings indicating reinforcement weaknesses, load-bearing tests, and curvature predictions. They were analyzing my foundation, studying the structure, examining the weakest points beneath my house. A chilling realization struck me. They weren't just tunneling through. They were preparing to break upward. A breach. The knocking hadn't been random. It had been a test. Before fear could consume me, I slipped quietly back toward the tunnel entrance. The voices and footsteps grew louder as I approached, so I kept to the shadows, hugging the wall. One of the floodlights flickered on suddenly, illuminating the tunnel with a harsh, white-blue glare. I shielded my eyes and crouched behind a metal support beam as several workers passed by, each wearing the same maintenance uniforms, each carrying tools and equipment. Their movements were efficient, coordinated, and silent. They began to set up around the drilling frame, adjusting parts, inspecting components, preparing for the next phase of digging. Any wrong move, any sound, and they would see me. Slowly, inch by inch, I moved back toward the ladder leading to the surface. Every footstep I took in the dirt felt like thunder compared to their muted, controlled movements. My heartbeat threatened to betray me. The ladder loomed just ahead, almost close enough to touch, when one of the workers turned suddenly. The flashlight beam swept across the wall, then the floor, then the crates, and then it lingered on my footprints, fresh ones, leading directly from the ladder deeper into the tunnel. The worker stiffened. He raised a hand toward another man. Their voices lowered into controlled urgency, and within seconds they followed the trail, my trail, leading straight toward the chamber I'd been in moments earlier. This was my moment. I climbed the ladder in swift, silent motions, pushing the heavy manhole cover up just enough to slip through. The cold night air hit me like a wave. Crickets chirped in the grass. The faint hum of distant streetlights filled the space. I pulled the cover down with quiet precision and crouched low behind the bushes. Through the small gap in the cover, I saw beams of flashlights flood the tunnel below. Their voices rose in intensity, metal clanged sharply, boots thudded against the ground in hurried patterns. They knew. They no longer suspected someone might be in the tunnels. They knew someone had been there. And as I backed away into the shadows of the greenbelt, clutching the stolen blueprint in my jacket, I realized something far more sinister. They didn't just know someone entered the tunnels. They knew exactly which house that someone would return to. Mine. And Phase 2? It hadn't been about planning a future breach. They were coming sooner than I thought. When I slipped back into my house, the quiet felt wrong, too perfect, too still, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something to happen. The stolen blueprint remained warm inside my jacket, its edges digging against my ribs like a reminder of the danger now woven into every breath of air around me. I locked the doors, closed the blinds, and turned off every light. Darkness felt safer, less visible, less exposed. But the truth pressed down on me. I was already exposed. They had found my footprints. They had searched the chamber. They knew someone had taken documents, and the only house marked as their primary access point was mine. Everything pointed toward one grim outcome. They would return to complete Phase 2, whatever it entailed. And I was the obstacle standing in their way. I spread the blueprint across my living room table, careful not to crease the fragile edges. The lines snaked across the paper like veins, pathways, measurements, reinforcing conduit. Beneath my house, thicker lines converged into one central point. The calculations around it indicated weight distribution, structural strain, and pressure tolerance. They hadn't just mapped my foundation. They had weakened it. Small notations showed tests conducted underground, readings of vibration strength, soil compaction, and load-bearing limitations. The tunnel beneath my hallway stood reinforced on all sides, except for a section directly under my bedroom. There, the scribbles suggested the intent to cut through the earth with precision. A vertical breach. A controlled breakthrough. All of Phase 2 seemed designed for one purpose: creating a direct passage upward. A tunnel leading inside my home. My breath tightened. The faint tremors through the floorboards these last nights weren't random, they were tests, measurements. They had been identifying the exact spot where the floor could be breached without collapsing the house entirely. A controlled intrusion. The knocking beneath the floor had been communication. Not a warning. A confirmation. The house creaked softly. My head snapped up. The clock read 12:47 a.m. Too early for their usual 2:13 a.m. operations. But tonight wasn't going to be like any other. The stolen blueprint had shifted the timeline. I could feel it in the tension of the walls, the weight of the silence, the way the air felt like tightly stretched wire waiting to snap. I crept toward the hallway, thermal camera in hand. The screen remained cool and blue, no heat signature from below yet. I exhaled, just barely, but the relief was short-lived. A noise echoed from outside. Not mechanical. Not underground. A vehicle engine. Low. Slow. Familiar. The same white HOA maintenance truck from before rolled down the street, moving at a near-stalking pace. Its headlights remained off, using only dim parking lights to navigate the suburban quiet. The truck stopped in front of my home. The engine rumbled through the night like a silent threat. A figure stepped out of the driver's side, broad shoulders, reflective patches glinting faintly in the moonlight. More doors opened. More footsteps. A second vehicle turned the corner, another maintenance truck. Then a third. A cold shiver slid down my spine. They weren't waiting for the 2:13 tunnel shift. They were coming now. I backed deeper into the house and pressed myself against the hallway wall. The thermal camera flared suddenly, orange streaks blooming beneath the floor. The tunnel machinery had come alive again. Not from the direction of the manhole, but directly beneath my home. Two fronts, above and below. They were surrounding me. The heat signature grew brighter, larger, more defined. The shape of a human figure formed beneath the hallway. Then another. Then two more. Their heat pulsed with the energy of movement, urgency, precision. The next tremor shook the floor hard enough to rattle picture frames on the wall. They were beginning their breach. The grinding noise of metal against packed earth resonated upward. Dust drifted from the baseboards. The floorboards vibrated under my feet with the deep hum of machinery pushing toward the surface. I stepped back, grabbing my keys, my phone, anything within reach. My heart pounded so loud it felt almost audible. Outside, the footsteps of HOA workers approached my front door. Their shadows stretched long across the porch. A soft metallic sound echoed, something slid into my door lock. A tool. A key. A forced entry device. The mechanism clicked gently, not aggressively, but with practiced ease. They weren't trying to break in violently. They were trying to enter quietly. Secretly. As if this, too, was part of their concealed operation. I rushed into my bedroom just as the front door latch clicked open. The house groaned under the shifting weight of the floorboards. A low hiss emanated from beneath me. The tunnel equipment had reached the thin layer between earth and wood. I grabbed the blueprint, stuffed it into my jacket, and moved toward the window. But I froze when I heard another sound, something far more unsettling. Beneath my feet, just inches below, a faint metallic scratching circled the area. Not aimlessly, not randomly. They were outlining the breach point, preparing to cut upward. The floor vibrated hard enough to make the wood flex. A fist-sized crack formed near the center of my room. Thin as a thread but unmistakable. A fracture in the surface. A doorway in progress. The front door creaked open fully, and the soft thud of boots stepped inside. Their movements were calculated, controlled, splitting up through the house to block exits, to corner me, to ensure I had nowhere to run. The heat signatures beneath me moved with increased intensity, coordinated. One figure positioned directly under the fresh crack. Another moved slightly back. The machinery shifted into place. They were seconds away from coming through the floor. I had only one option. Escape through the window. Quietly, I forced the latch open. The cold night air flooded in, and I slipped through the narrow opening just as the machinery beneath the bedroom floor roared to life with a vibration so powerful the foundation trembled. I landed on the grass below and bolted across the yard, never once looking back. My breath tore through my lungs, my legs burning with panic and adrenaline. The HOA trucks loomed in front of the house, doors open, engines idling. I stayed low, ducking behind the side fence as shadows moved through my living room. Then it happened. A deafening crack echoed through the night. They had breached the floor. Inside my house, Phase 2 had begun. The thunderous crack of my bedroom floor giving way echoed across the yard like the splitting of a tree trunk struck by lightning. The sound carried into the night, sharp and violent, confirming that the HOA's tunnels had finally breached upward into the one place meant to remain untouchable, my home. I crouched behind the fence, chest rising in tight, frantic breaths, watching shadows swirl behind the curtains of my bedroom window as figures descended through the breach they had carved like thieves climbing through the ceiling of a bank vault. But darkness was my ally. Distance was my shield. And the blueprint pressing against my ribs was my weapon. The night around me felt alive, cold wind brushing through the grass, the dim glow of streetlights casting stretched silhouettes across the pavement, the hum of truck engines vibrating like a warning signal. The HOA workers moved in quiet formation, their reflective patches flickering like the eyes of predators. They believed I was inside. They assumed they were steps away from capturing evidence, silencing a threat, and burying their secrets once more beneath the soil. They didn't know I had escaped. They didn't know I had the blueprints. They didn't know I was already planning my counterstrike. I slipped through the side alley between my house and the neighbors, keeping low, feet careful on the cold ground. Every second counted. I knew they would search the house, sweep through each room, check closets, bathrooms, crawl spaces. Eventually, they would realize I wasn't inside. And when they did, the search would expand outward. The trucks, the greenbelt, the perimeter. They would hunt for me. So I moved fast. The community center, HOA headquarters, sat only 4 blocks away. The glass building that once seemed sterile and cold now appeared vulnerable, exposed. The place where their secrets lived, stored in documents, computers, and files behind locked doors. But it wasn't the building I needed access to. It was the people inside it. And tonight, the HOA board was meeting. Not publicly. Not announced. A closed-door session kept off the books, one of the many unethical practices they considered standard. I'd seen the calendar through a sliver of office blinds days ago when I snooped in the lobby. A small notice left on a whiteboard inside the staff room. Internal review, Thursday 2 a.m. That was tonight. That meant the president, the treasurer, the operations manager, and several board members were inside right now. And they were unaware that their biggest secret was walking briskly toward them. I circled through backyards, slipping past garden sheds, crossing patios, staying in the shadows as porch lights flicked on automatically with my movement. The HOA patrols were distracted at my house, leaving the rest of the neighborhood mostly unmonitored. My breath puffed into faint clouds as I rushed down a narrow footpath connecting to the greenbelt. The trees loomed overhead, branches bending slightly in the cold wind. By the time the community center came into view, a structure glowing faintly with fluorescent light through its front windows, my heartbeat had settled into the steady determination of someone who no longer feared what lay ahead. My phone buzzed in my pocket, not from messages, from the recording mode I had prepared earlier. The camera lens poked from a tiny hole in the fabric of my jacket, already recording every movement. Evidence. Solid, undeniable, time-stamped evidence. I approached the side of the building, where a single maintenance door sat half-hidden under an overhang. A keypad controlled access, but the doorframe carried faint scratches. Someone had forced it open before. Past workers. Contractors. Board members cutting corners. I pried the frame with the crowbar I had packed earlier. The metal gave way softly, quietly, just enough to slip through. Inside, the hall stretched empty. The hum of machinery echoed faintly through the corridor. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly pale glow. Voices drifted from the meeting room. Low. Serious. Unaware. I crept toward the sound, my pulse steady, the blueprint clutched in my hand. The door to the boardroom was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see them. The president standing at the head of the table, gesturing to a projected map of the neighborhood with red tunnel lines illuminating the screen. The same map I had found underground. He tapped my property. The room fell silent. Then he spoke. His tone was cold, calculated, confident. Though I couldn't hear every word, the pieces were unmistakable. Expansion plans, infrastructure control, water access routes, power rerouting possibilities, hidden utilities, unauthorized dig sites, a network that would give the HOA unprecedented control over homeowners, without their consent or knowledge. My home had been chosen as the access point because of its soil density, central location, and structural compatibility. A perfectly positioned hub. A test breach. A test breach. They had planned to enter my home entirely. To set up a concealed access shaft. To begin using it as a vertical control point. My privacy meant nothing to them. My rights meant nothing to them. My home was not a home, it was a location on a map. And the moment I realized that, the fear inside me shifted. It hardened into something stronger. Purpose. With a deep inhale, I pushed the boardroom door open. The room fell silent. Every head turned. Their faces twisted from confusion, to shock, to recognition, to fear. I placed the stolen blueprint on the center of the table and activated my phone screen. The display lit up with the thermal footage, the drilling frames, the footsteps, the breach under my bedroom floor. Every incriminating second of it. I didn't need to speak. The truth was loud enough. Their expressions changed instantly, panic blooming across every face. I held up the phone, the recording still running, then reached into my pocket and tapped the emergency broadcast shortcut I'd set up earlier. With one final confirmation, all the footage, tunnel scans, blueprints, audio, images, was sent to multiple recipients. Local news stations, city inspectors, law enforcement, the neighborhood's online forums. Their secret was gone. Bursting into the world. The HOA president lunged toward me, but I stepped back, letting his motion be captured on camera. The boardroom erupted in chaos, shouting, scrambling, fear spreading faster than they could contain. Outside, sirens blared. Fast. Approaching. They weren't for me. They were for them. By sunrise, the HOA was shut down. The tunnels sealed. The board arrested. The project exposed. And the neighborhood finally understood the truth beneath their feet. As for me, I came out on top. Not because I fought harder, but because I refused to stay silent.